Hey folks, welcome back to Holy Living with Huff and Sal. I'm Huff.
And I'm Sal.
Uh, Coming to you, it's actually Monday, the 10th of April.
Yeah.
It's
Alrighty.
actually Monday morning. And we pray that you had a wonderful Resurrection Sunday. Our day yesterday was so full.
Oh my.
Just had an amazing church service,
Yes.
and then amazing time with their family or kids.
Yeah.
We call them our kids. They're
They're grown.
our two full-grown adult sons and our daughter-in-law. Then we had a beautiful service last night. We did a live recording project over at our good friend Danny and Ronnie's church, and it was an amazing time.
It was beautiful.
I've said that even if the recording doesn't turn out, the church service we had was fully worth the time.
Yes.
We actually talked about April being Finance Month, but last week we did something different just because of the school shooting and all. We wanted to talk about that and the need for better attention to mental health.
Yeah.
But we do want to continue forward with the plan that April was going to be kind of centered around finances, and we got some unique stuff, right? So one episode we interviewed a former coworker, actually still a current coworker, who's actually involved in real estate, and that may not seem like something you may want to talk about in finances, but we see a lot of folks that think because of their past issues with finances that they can't own a home, or they want to own a home but they don't know how to go about it. And so we have a wonderful interview with JT that will be airing next week. But this week I sat down with Brent and I have been friends since middle school. First met in 7th grade.
Wow.
Harpers Ferry Junior High School.
Oh my.
And Brent and I met then, formed a friendship, and even was friends. After high school was over, we still hung out together and did some things. And so, just so proud to call Brent a friend. He's a good Christian man. When he and I started hanging out together, we weren't good Christian men, neither one of us, and so we've had an interesting. Our past is interesting.
We don't have a past.
But I'm thankful that we're both on this side now.
Me too.
And so Brent's his entire adult career has centered around finance, and so that's what he went to school for. He actually holds a master's degree, and so. But what's impressive about the interview is not about his education. It's the education that God gave him through his own finances. And now Brent has set out to help other people with theirs. And so we had a great talk about finances and personal coaching, right? And sometimes we need somebody to hold us accountable,
Yeah.
right? To help us be accountable, but also to teach us things, right? And so, finances obviously, one of the pillars, right, of when we look at holy living, right? We talk about emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, but then also financial.
Yeah.
But financial hits all the other areas.
It does.
A lot of people they make emotional purchases that they're then emotional about
Retail
later.
therapy.
Yeah, retail therapy, right? And so finances can have a big effect. As a matter of fact, finances is often quoted as one of the huge causes for divorce.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
And so it's a very important topic. And so just as we tell people that if you're having mental struggles, seek help, same thing with finances.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're having financial struggles, please seek help.
Yeah.
And so I pray that you'll enjoy this interview that we were able to have that I was able to have with my good brother Brent Milbourne. So pray that you enjoy the rest of this video. And we love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Amen. All right, we'd like to welcome you guys back to Holy Living with Huff and Sal, except for Sal's not here. It's Huff, just Huff. But today I'm sitting down with a long time friend. We met in middle school, right? I guess middle school, Harpers Ferry Junior High. I mean, don't get no better than that. Go Tigers. Right? And we met in middle school. We're the same age, same grade, and we went from middle school all the way through high school, and actually hung out after high school, even in the summers when you were going to college, and I was working. I was going to School of Hard Knocks. And so with me today is Brent Milbourne.
And Brent's just got a wonderful heart. Loves the Lord, loves his family, and loves other people, and genuinely cares about others. And so, but April's Finance Month, as we kind of already told you guys, was coming in. So today we're going to be talking about personal finances and financial goals and stuff like that. And but before we get going on that part, Brent, just give a little bit of your background. I know that you went to school, but other people don't know you like I do. So,
as Huff said, I went to right out of high school. I'm a graduate of WVU with a undergraduate degree in accounting, and then later on, as I progressed in my career, got into banking. I got my MBA in finance. Thank my employer for that. It didn't cost me anything, but a few years of work. And basically, that's what I've been in all of my adult life, has been in some type of finance or accounting, and that's what I continue to do today.
Awesome. And so I'm sure you've seen a lot of craziness over the years, right? And watching the economy go up and down and things like that. And so I'm sure it's helped garner a lot of experience over the years. But just because you're in finance and receive finances doesn't mean everything's always hunky-dory in your own. All right. So, tell us a little bit about your story, because we're going to talk about your ministry today and how you help folks. But it starts, usually our message starts with a mess. And so talk about your story.
Well, again, like I said, I've been in accounting and finance all of my life, but that doesn't always mean you're great at it yourself. Been plenty of times I've made decisions that if the people had come to me and talked to me about the same thing, and they'd have presented me with that decision, I'd have said, what are you thinking? But so don't think education or someone in finance or in a specific field always knows the best answer. So. But where my story really starts with my ministry was about 10 years ago, I guess. Just found myself living paycheck to paycheck. And Huff can attest that, my wife and I are both in professional careers, and, money's never really been something that should have been an issue. But nonetheless, it was. Poor decisions, going out to eat all the time. Found myself well in debt and living paycheck to paycheck, and just stressing myself out, had a child, thinking about, the future of college and things like that, how you can afford those things, and doing the normal things, but it just still making poor decisions despite my education. So, as God often does, he put someone in my life at that time to help me out, and suggested a ministry that's out there. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. It's Dave Ramsey. So I went, took that what's called a Financial Peace University class, and it cleared a lot of things up. It really wasn't anything I didn't know, but it just gave me a lot of insight into why I was in the situation I was in and things like that, and helped me. And I'm not here to promote Dave Ramsey. Don't get me wrong. It's a ministry that helped me, but there are other ministries out there that can help people. I'm not saying that's the only thing that can help people. But, it made the most sense to me. It worked the best for me. So that's kind of where I was at. But one of the stories I tell, when I got to that point where I was like, this just doesn't make sense that I'm living paycheck to paycheck on the money that me and my spouse make. This doesn't make sense. And so I literally sat down and one evening, mad at myself for living like this, because I shouldn't be, but not really knowing why. So I got on my computer, downloaded about 3 months worth of materials off of my banking stuff, downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet. Started parsing out where I'm spending my money, rent or, mortgage, car payment, this, that, and the other, food stuff. So I'm looking across and I'm like, there's no way. I've made some mistake. I'm in what I called my grocery category, which is whether you're eating out or the normal groceries that you buy at the store or whatever. And I was so convinced that I had messed up that I literally went back and started the process over. I mean, that's how stunned I was. I mean, and then I went from stunned to being really, really mad. But I did it a second time, and I was like, this can't be right. So then I said, you know what, I'm going to parse this out between what I spend, for the family to at the grocery store and things like that, and then the little thing, the little things that, stopping for coffee and donut in the morning, eating out on special occasions, right? Because that's all I thought I was doing. Well, when I saw that number, I was spending 3 times what I was spending to feed my family on those coffee and donuts.
So you were
3 times.
3 times just on yourself.
Huh?
On yourself for coffee.
Well, dinners out generally involve my family, but still,
yeah.
3 times what we were eating normally. And there were, as I thought through the process and things like that, I'm like, one of the reasons I wasn't spending a lot of money in the home is because we were going out to eat a lot more than I even thought of.
Wow.
I was like, do we really go out to eat that much? And so, me and my wife sat down and we had a come to Jesus moment, as they say. So it was, and I've talked to people over the years since then, and, sometimes that's one of the problems is if you don't sit down and really watch what you're doing and at a minimum, write down or look at your statements and stuff and say, if you're in that situation. So that's kind of what got me started. And
well, I call it the cost of convenience, right? So when my son started his first year of college, also WVU, go Mountaineers, they got all my money. I might as well root for them.
Right.
They got to have my money up there. So the funny thing is your kids don't pay attention to how much stuff costs. So the deal was, we pay for college, we pay for his housing, but he's responsible for his food and gas, right? That was the deal in his books. Well, I don't think he did a whole lot of booking, so. But this is the call I get a couple of weeks after he's in college, right? Dad, do you know how much Red Bulls cost? Yes, son, I really do. I do know how much they cost. Expensive, ain't they? I said, it's amazing how you come to that conclusion when you started spending your money, right? But so I travel a lot for work, but the convenience factor, right? When you stop by that store, right? The amount of money you could spend for a dozen donuts at the grocery store, and good donuts, by the way, right? But you get one, and the coffee, I could have bought a whole thing of coffee.
Exactly.
But it's the convenience factor, right? Because they make it there hot, and they have it available.
And you bought it at a convenience store, which is 3 times the cost that you would spend.
Well, that's the convenience factor, right? They charge you a premium because they had it, and I didn't really need a dozen. I only wanted 1,
right,
or 2, right? Maybe 3. It depends on what.
You don't want to go in the office and not have some for everybody else, right?
Get some for somebody else, right? But it was but the amount of money you spend on that, right? So what happened after that spreadsheet, and you and your wife sit down and how did you go from there?
Like I said, as God would have it, He put someone a friend of ours that we had known a long time. She had been in a similar situation, and she was actually teaching the Financial Peace University class.
Oh, cool.
And she invited us. We went, and and believe me, it's not something that happened overnight. I can tell you, I'll probably get in trouble for this, but me and my wife think very differently about money. So that's
you too.
Well,
I thought it was only me and my wife.
Well, and that's one of the things when I'm working with people that that you find, especially it's hard enough to one of the things I tell people when you start to sit down with a budget, you're not going to get it right the first month. You're not going to get it right the second, third month. It's going to take you a good 3 to 4, possibly 6 months before you even get comfortable with. Because it all, you write down what you got and you say, all right, I'm going to put my dollars here and I'm going to keep that available and things like that. But you always miss something. Something comes up, and people get caught in the traps. People and people don't think ahead. I was still, again, going back to my story, one of the things I was stuck in is what I call the Christmas, I don't know what the correct word for it is, but the Christmas cycle maybe, finance Christmas and then spend the rest of the year paying it off.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of planning ahead. And that's one of the things, I'll sit down with people and, one of the things is part of what I do is I'm a coach. Coaches don't play the game. So people don't come to me and say, you're not going to hand me a piece of paper or say, or do my budget for me. Good luck, buddy.
Yeah.
I got my own to worry about. That's not what I do. That's not how, because I may not be around tomorrow. So I'm not doing you any good doing it for you. And I'm not going to choose the things or look at the goals that you have in your life. But, but it's very common, I'll ask people, just send me a list of everything that you spend on a regular monthly basis. But don't forget about, a lot of people pay a car payment every 6 months. Well, break that down into what you'll need so that when you get to the end of the 6 months, you've got the whole amount.
Right.
Don't wait until June when it's due to say, oh, I got to throw this in my budget now. Well,
Yeah.
doesn't always work out that well. But so that's just some of the things that I run into with people when I'm talking to them. But again, you'd be surprised how many people, they don't think about Christmas. Well, I mean, unless you're expecting to get, a bonus, some people do get Christmas bonuses,
Yeah.
but very few of them get one to the level that they're going to spend at
Right.
that time of year. So,
Well, speaking of spending, let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute. I will tell you that I overspent for years. I think I was trying to buy my kids love. I actually was working a lot of hours, and I felt guilty over it. And so the amount that we spent, like on Christmas, was just honestly, I think it was out of line. And I know families now that are very financially sensible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one family in particular actually has, a pretty large family, and their kids are more well-rounded, and they expect less and seem to be happier than families I've seen that are like mine, where we spent tons of money. I mean, one year, our oldest son turned 16, right? So he needed a vehicle. And our young son was into motorcycles, motocross. And so, there was a truck with a motorcycle in the back for Christmas. Now, that wasn't the only thing now.
exactly.
That was the big present, right?
Right.
And the amount of money, the thousands of dollars just on that one thing. And honestly, it didn't do anything for my relationship with my boys. We just overspent, but I under-delivered in the category, in the area of really being a dad. And so I tried to buy love, and I think I see a lot of that still happening today. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And again, as far as what I do, I mean, one of the tenets that I've been trained to do, and again, I would have never thought of it on my own, so it was beneficial that I took some education to learn about, what truly happens is, I mean, generally, people generally aren't bad with money. I mean, no one wakes up as far as I know, nobody's ever come to me and said, you know what, my goal is to be poor. I mean,
I want to waste money.
Exactly. That's not anybody's goal. So, you really got to get to the bottom of it. And sometimes there are things that I can't help with. I mean, it's mental, it's psychological. It's one of the things I was thinking about, and you and I talked a little bit before we started the recording, is that addictions come in all forms and sizes, and most people probably think I'm crazy saying that, but there are people who are addicted to money. I was. I mean, I can tell you before I found Christ that money was my God, and there was never going to be enough of it to meet my needs or because as soon as you got that one thing, you want the next thing.
Right.
I mean, it never stops. And on the point of I never felt like I was buying my child's love, but I only have one, so I spoil her. I mean, she's my princess. I spoil her at Christmas and things like that, and I know I've overspent plenty of times on things, but it was funny. She's about to launch off to college, so she had back in the fall was going through the application process, and she had to do some essays and things like that. Well, one of the ones, and I'm going to start crying here, is there was an essay where she had to take a picture. It could be a physical picture or a picture in her mind and talk about it. And, you think about all the things you do for your kids financially or whatever. She talked about how great it was for me and her going to her elementary school father-daughter dances.
Oh, wow.
And that didn't cost us a thing. Not $1. She didn't talk about any of the gifts I ever got her at Christmas, and so to your point, you know, parents really think about that. I mean, spending time with your kid, and it goes by quick, believe me. It feels like yesterday I was holding her in my arms for the first time, and, you know,
I can't
she's
believe
she's about to launch off to college. This is the part where my wife's behind it, you know, crying. She's
listen,
you got that whole emotional thing, and we only got one, so we went from empty nesters to having a family right back to empty nesters.
The picture I saw not too long ago on social media, she's just grown up so much. I just like, that can't be the same girl.
Yep.
It's like, wow, they grow up so fast, you know, but she is a good young lady.
Yeah, we've been blessed. That's one thing I can say. We've been blessed.
She's smart. She works hard, and you guys have done well with that. And of course, we all look back at parenting, and there are a lot of boxes we wish we could uncheck, you know. Yeah. But at the same time, God even uses us through those moments, even where we're not quite doing it right. One of the most powerful things I found as a parent is going back to my children and letting them know. This happened to me at D6 conference. It just crushed me, man. I just really saw where I went wrong and not spending time with them. Mm-hmm. And I come home and apologize to my kids. You know, I mean, we're talking grown boys now. You know, Daniel, my oldest, was already an adult at this point. You know, and I think he was actually going to college at the time. And I just had to tell him, boys, I messed up. I had been brought to the place, and that was a powerful moment with me just being willing and open and honest about my mistakes, and our kids can learn from our mistakes too, so that can be a powerful thing. But you talked about you talked about addiction a little bit, as far as money can obviously be an addiction, but a lot of times people can use buying. It can be a mental thing, right? Like retail therapy is what they call it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you see that a lot. You know, people who, you know, as Huff and South, you know, I've been watching these videos, so I'm kind of up for the most part on what they've been talking about prior to this. You know, I mean, you know, when people get down and depressed and I know depression, believe me, I've been there as well. You know, some people turn to food. You know, some people turn to alcohol or drugs, and some people turn to spending money. I mean, you know, there's a gentleman that I follow on Facebook. I've read his book. He's not so much a financial guy, but he talks a lot about why people do things and really about why people decide, you know, kind of finding your calling, not from a spiritual perspective. So I don't want to indicate that this is a biblical type thing, but his name's Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called Finding Your Why, and it's a very powerful book. So I recommend it if you've never heard of him. But he talks about a lot. He's done a lot of study, and I mean, he studied this. This is not him just throwing things out there about, you know, you hear about all these generational things, you know, how the generations are different and stuff like that. But one of his big things is you know, we've become a society where, you know, we expect people to know things without teaching them. You know, we expect people just to pick up, and, you know, one of the issues is that we don't teach these things. You know, and I was even thinking back before, you know, you had asked me, or since you've asked me to do this, and I mean, even in our education, which, you know, is a little further removed from today's students, you know, I don't remember, you know, I remember in elementary school learning how to write a check and stuff like that, but I mean, unless you took a home economic class, even us, we didn't have a whole lot of what I would call financial thing. You know, I mean, I had an allowance, and, you know, I learned from that, you know, in the home and things like that. But I mean, as far as formal education, we still, you know, and even back to our generation, I used to get on people, you know, you guys should have been taught this, and then I just had, you know, it was one of those things. I thought back and I said, you know, I don't remember really. I never took home ec, so I'm just assuming.
Mrs. Hubbard, baby, I remember it. I made cookies.
But you know, I think sometimes we expect people to know things that they haven't been taught. Well, and, you know, that puts pressure on them. But getting back to the mental health side of it, I guess, is it not only strain. I mean, it can be a strain on a marriage. I mean, you know, there are statistics out there, you can read them all day long, that, you know, one of the leading causes of divorce in the country is financial.
Money, yeah.
Yeah, it's financial differences and stuff like that. And there are certain things that, I mean, that you're never going to agree on. But if you're willing to compromise a little bit, or you're willing to see the other person's perspective, you don't have to like it. But, you know, if you're going to be financially successful in your marriage, especially, you know, you got to be somewhat on the same page, you know, because if the other person's working against you or you're working against them, it's, you know, and that's one thing, you know, that's another piece of what I do when I'm working with couples is that, you know, it's, you know, you guys are going to have to figure, you know, and I can't figure it out for you. You know, I'm certainly not a marriage counselor.
Well, I will say this. So, and you even made the mention that you and your wife have very different, you know, this not spending habits maybe, but you know, you look at money differently, or you look at what your goals are for the money maybe a little differently, or what you want to spend your money on differently. And I'm the same way, right? So me and my wife are the same way, and we're in a little different kind of situation, right? So my wife doesn't work, right? And so the only way we could pull off what we do here at the church is one of us can't work. Right? There's a lot of stuff that gets done behind the scenes that my wife is able to do, and that way I work because honestly, with my career, have a little bit of ability to make a little more money. You know, for the time spent than she would just at this stage in our lives. It's not that I'm smarter because my wife is very much smarter than I am. But the simple fact is that regardless of what people want to say today, God made male and female different for a reason.
Exactly.
Right? And, you know, when he looked at Adam and said, well, not good that he be alone, he made him help me, right? What my wife and I found is we also are very different when it comes to spending money. Now, my wife was raised, her mom was a stay-at-home mom. But her dad was president of a chemical company. At least that's what he retired as. They were never hugely wealthy, but they did okay. They ate at they went to the country club every Friday night for dinner. Right? And so her dad did pretty good. And so she was raised a little differently than I was in that sense. But her dad taught her this, and it wasn't a bad thing, though. If you're going to buy something, buy the best the first time. Don't, right? Where I grew up, like, you know, when we were looking for a car, we just had to find something we could afford.
Exactly.
Right? Now, that's not how my wife looked at life, right? You don't buy it's not just because you can afford it. We're going to find the best thing. We want an SUV, we're going to find the best SUV. We're going to read through all the review magazines. We're going to find, honey, we can't afford that. But what we found is when we finally got past, now I say finally, I mean, we're talking 20 years finally, not 2 months. When we finally got to the place where she and I love each other more than we love ourselves, that we were able to finally compromise. But what we found is it wasn't so much compromise when you think about, the only reason I say it's not compromise is because when you think about compromise, well, I give up this and you give up that, and then we'll figure out what's in the middle, what's left that, you know, that we can live with. And that you know, that kind of is compromise. But what we have found is it's a little different. Is, you know, she was raised this way and I was raised this way, but she looks out for my interest, I look out for her interest. So like buying a car, okay, for instance, because I'm transitioning into my own business, you know, we didn't want to go pick up debt, so we had to buy something within the realm of what we have in savings, right? So there's one issue, but I don't want her breaking down, right? So I look at her safety. So we wanted to find something that met that, but also stayed in the financial realm of what we could afford and also what I could work on, right? But she also doesn't want me to have to crawl in her vehicles all the time, right? So I'm a shade tree mechanic. And so when we started me watching out for her and her watching out for me, we found finally, after I'm talking 6 months of searching, was finally able to find the right vehicle that met everything. And neither one of us felt like we really compromised what we thought was. But had we been 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been a much different conversation, and we probably would have ended up in debt, honestly. And so it takes a long while to get there.
It does, and again, anything financial. One of the tenets that I work by, and again, you know, this comes from the Dave Ramsey thing, is, and this is the one thing I can say we have 100% stuck to since we started this process, me and my wife both, is we do not buy anything right off the cuff. We go out somewhere and we see something and my wife's like, oh, I'd really like to have that. Or I'm like, man, you know, we could use this at the house or whatever. Take 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
We don't unless we intend. Now, if obviously if you're
If
going
you
to
want-
Walmart and get groceries, yes, we're going to get the groceries we want and we need. But if we're out, we're cruising, or on the internet, looking for, see that nice shiny new truck that I've been wanting, 24 hours. And if in 24 hours you still want it and you've got a plan to get it, then, and obviously you can afford it. But that's one of my goals, and one of my goals in my own financial life is I'm going to buy a vehicle at some point in my life that I don't have to finance. It's going to be, and so that's why I drive a 2004, 200,000 miles on it, paint chipping and fading minivan.
You're still in that same minivan?
Yes,
The blue one?
yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
But again, I'm not a car guy, and
It's not your thing.
it's not my thing. I talk to people and stuff. I'm like, one of the problems with some people with financial, that get into financial issues is, they're driving a BMW on a Pinto paycheck. I mean, and that gets you in trouble. You can't afford it. But again, and like you talked about, getting back to the, wanting to have, one of the things I used to say all the time, and I'm like, other parents make life a lot harder on me, because I'm sure you've had this conversation. And I tell people this all the time. My daughter was, I don't know, maybe 4th, 5th grade, not even in middle school yet. She comes home and, Dad, I need a cell phone. And I'm like, negative. You don't need a cell phone. You want a cell phone, but 1, you don't need it. 2, you're not getting one. You're with us all the time. You're never not with us, other than while you're at school, and they know how to communicate with us. Well, my friends have one.
Oh, yeah.
And so, as I repeated for many years through middle school, if you think that you're going to get everything your friends have, you're going to have a lot of disappointment over the next so many years.
Yeah.
And sometimes I gave in, again, she's my princess.
Oh,
So, but that's another part of it. I mean, so many people go out and spend money because the neighbor's got it, or, like you said, buying love. Well, your son comes home, hey, my buddy's got a really nice motorcycle, and we've had this thing for, what's the first thing you do? I'm not meeting it, I'm gone all the time. And even the situation with, you're talking about you and Sal, and that when my daughter was born, as once my wife got pregnant, we talked about, because, she had a desire for, maybe the first 3 or 4 or 5 years until she got into school, possibly. And this is one of the few successful conversations back in those days that we had. And, we sat down and talked about it. And I said, I'm completely on board with that. But you have to remember, okay, at that time, we both had incomes. I said, so yours is going away. So are you willing to accept a lifestyle that we will have to have? Because, when she was born, I was making considerably less than I do now and things like that. So, and it wasn't that we were going to be destitute. It wasn't, we didn't have to sell the house and live in a tent, but there were going to have to be compromises and things like that. And it just, after the conversation, and again, I don't think she felt like she was compromising, or I felt like I was compromising. We were just coming to a decision that we felt like that it was better for her to be working, because of what we wanted out of life and the goals that we had. So, that's one of those times we did compromise well, way back before we were doing that very well.
Yeah, I mean, so God made us different so that we could come to a better conclusion than we would on our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we put those two schools of thought together, we got a much broader base, and then we could actually make, better decisions if we're both rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
For the same goal, I guess I should say. Which kind of also makes me think about goals, right? So when you and I were talking off camera before we started, so there are these financial coach stuff out here now, like Dave Ramsey, those guys, and we also did Crown at one point here. We've done both, right? And both great programs. But there was something that you said that kind of, you guys like, man, I need to make sure we talk about that. And we talked about making a point about it. But so what I think that I find in those I'm gonna call it a canned program, right? Because it's a structured program.
Yeah.
is they are kind of setting the goal for you. It's almost like you're signing up for that program because their goal is your goal, right? Their goal is financial peace or freedom, right? And they got a prescribed way to get there. Now there's some little bit of flexibility, but they map that program out.
Mm-hmm.
But you said something different, that with your ministry and coaching is more than just financial. But you said that you asked them what their actual goal was, because their goal may not be match those canned programs. Talk about that.
Correct. You know, again, as a coach, I mean, whether it's financial or, you know, I mean, I used to be a youth basketball coach. Even in that, I mean, the goal is to get the kid to where they want to be. I mean, you can teach a kid, you know, I mean, you know, there are certain things you can't teach a kid. You can't teach a kid to run fast. I mean, that's God-given, things like that. But you can help them, you know, learn and things like that. And it's the same way in the financial world. I mean, if I'm going to go in and tell you what to do and stuff like that, I'm not getting you to where you want to be. I'm getting you to where I want to be. And to me, that's not the purpose of what I do. You know, because, and I think I said this before we were on camera, is that, you know, there are plenty of people in the world that are, you know, have accepted the fact that they're going to have a house payment, a car payment, you know, maybe even credit card payments until the day they die. And if they're okay with that, I can teach anything in the world, but they're still going to make the same decisions.
Right.
I mean, so my ministry and what I do and how I work with people is, you know, I ask them, you know, first of all, why are you coming to me? That gets to the earlier point I was talking about, you know, is this truly just you don't know, or, you know, do I have a spending issue because I just don't pay attention to how I'm spending, or is it something a little deeper that maybe I can't handle? You know, maybe I need to send them to a professional, you know, that, and that's the other thing with me, you know, I also have people come to me and they're very financially stable. They want advice on, you know, where should I be investing? You know, what should I be investing in? And that's when I say, well, let me give you this person's card, because that's not what. And I think it's important on a financial issue. If you're someone who is truly seeking help, make sure you're getting the help you need, because there's a lot of people out there that'll sell you anything because they're trying to sell you something. And you know, I'm not going to get into a big thing, but these get rich quick schemes, and again, we talked about that a little bit. You know, you see them all, and believe me, I've fallen for several of them and caused myself issues as well. But and I was telling Huff earlier that, you know, most people that have gotten into the infomercial world is because they've already done as much as they can in what they're trying to teach you. So now they got to sell it to you because they're not making money on it, you know. And again, I'm sure there are some people that have a heart for that, and they're really honestly trying to help you, but most of them are not. But again, it's all, you know, you could almost somewhat call it financial therapy, what I do, because you're really trying to get at the heart of what the issue is, you know, why people aren't where they want to be. And to me, financial peace doesn't, you know, it's not a dollar figure. You know, I mean, some people, you know, I just want to have, when I get to retirement, I want to have X amount in my 401k. All right, well, let's work towards that without, you know, damaging any other part of your financial.
Right.
And other people, you know, I don't want to worry about anything. You know, one of the things I tell people, you know, there's this thing in our country, and I think it's uniquely American, that, you know, everybody wants to be rich, but I found through my own journey and talking to others that most people don't want to be rich, they want to be free. And I'll give you an example. If I told you today, if I walked in here today and I looked at you and I said, all right, Huff, I'll put $500,000 in your bank account and never talk to you again, whatever. Not never talk to you again, but that's what I'm going to do for you. Or I'll make your house payment for the rest of your life until it's paid off. I'll make your car payment until that's paid off. And if you have any credit card bills, I'll pay all those off. So the only bills you have will be, you know, the electric and stuff, like, you know, normal bills that are going to come every month no matter what you do. Now, some people will take that $500,000 because they want that instant gratification. They're going to go out and blow it anyway. But, I mean, and that's one of the things I tell people when they're like, well, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm like, write down all of your bills that you got, whether it's, and take off the table anything that's debt that you can at some point stop paying for. what would your life be if the other side of the page was just that? If you didn't have any debt at all. And again, not everybody wants that, but I know my lifestyle would be a lot different. I'd probably be back out, spending 3 times out, eating out.
Yeah.
What I spend on. But, and people just don't logically think about that. They don't logically think about, how, and don't get me wrong, sometimes you need that. So, there are people in situations that, that's their only option, that they have to do this. But, so again, it all depends on, what goal are you looking to get to, and can I help you? Because the one thing I'm not going to do, and we've talked about ministry, but I'm going to be honest with you, I do charge for these services.
Sure.
It's something I do. And when I first started out, and again, I look at the people's situation. So some people I may charge differently, or we may work out a way where it's not so much up front and then we make up the difference at the end. But it's about helping the person. It's about getting them to where they want to be, and helping them understand. Some people don't. I mean, they really don't know. They just don't want to be paycheck to paycheck. That's what they know.
Yeah.
So
right now they feel strapped. All I know is that if something happens and I lose my job, I don't have any backup. Right? Because as we were talking before we went on cameras, I've talked to a lot of folks. They're only a couple of weeks away from ruin. Right? I mean, if they lost their income right now, they only got enough to make it just a couple of weeks. Right? And then the bills are going to be stacking up, and they don't have a way to pay it.
Right.
And that's something you said about being uniquely American. Our need for stuff is very uniquely American. We took a bunch of teens to Mexico on a mission trip. You should have seen how broken they were. Just broken inside because they knew how much they, had depended on stuff for happiness, and they go down to this third world countries. That area we were in was pretty much like that, where these folks don't have anything, and what little bit they get, they're so appreciative, but they're happy. We met a lady. They didn't have an inside kitchen, basically a one-room house, and she had to go gather up cow chips, dried cow manure, out of the field to use it for cooking fuel because she couldn't afford propane.
Right.
And she cooked over that on this old pot. And I'm like, I wonder how burnt manure makes your beans taste, because that's kind of, I'm like, you definitely ain't going to cook a hot dog over a stick on that thing. I'm not roasting a hot dog over a manure. It tastes real crappy. But anyway, but this woman, when we took each family like a month's worth of food. And when I say a month's worth of food, Brent, I'm not talking American food.
right.
I'm talking rice, dried beans that they have to soak, right? Because it goes a lot further. The money and oil to be able to cook with, and salt, and we take salt and pepper. We take for granted in this country, right? I mean, down there, salt was it's hugely expensive, right? And so just these kind of spices and stuff, and I mean, this lady was so happy, And we saw this woman over the course of 3 days. She had the same clothes on all 3 days. She didn't have anything. And so we come back to America, and we're so materialistic. That was the word I couldn't think of earlier. And these teens were just broken, right? It's like, I just can't believe it. I just spent all my time wanting stuff, and I come down here. And they had such a good time. And the phones didn't work half the time down there because they don't like their cell service down there. It was terrible. And it was great. It was great that their phones didn't work because we had such a good time. But in America, it's almost like you're deprived if you don't have a house and 2 new cars, right? And somehow we think that, to the point that people have compromised the gospel message to a health and wealth gospel, right? Which is not the gospel.
Exactly.
It's a health and wealth message that people buy into and send their money hoping that it's right. Because sow your seed of faith 1,000, God's going to send you 10,000. That's not the way God works.
Exactly.
And now, when you give to God honestly and openly, not for gain, but you just give to Him,
Exactly.
what's His.
It's about what's in here.
He
Why
can-
you're giving it.
Yeah, He can bless you monetarily if He chooses to, but your blessings may come in a different way, and we have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, and so money, the Bible says a lot about money, and when the first one we did was Crown Financial, and that was the first time I saw a lot of the scriptures that I had seen them kind of individually, but never kind of put it all together.
Right.
And it was really kind of blew my mind. Of course, I keep coming back to your slave to the lender.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay. Every time I pull up to the bank window, I'm like, you're not enslaving me. And anyway,
But there's a lot of truth in that, and again, I get into conversations with people, and it's not always. I mean, I talk to people just in general. I mean, somebody comes to me and just wants a little bit of advice. No, I'm not charging you for it. Sure, I'll give you a little bit of advice, or, and as I've said, people have called me and I've been like, I just, for what you're trying to do, I don't have the expertise to help you.
right.
Things like that. But I mean, the one thing too, I when you talk about, a lot of people won't come and seek out the help because they're embarrassed or whatever. Don't be embarrassed. Believe you would. I can tell you 100% through stories I've heard with other people who deal with financial situations, whether it be coaching or whatever. There are a lot of people that you would never ever in your life guess that are getting financial coaching. One of the things I tell people, you would not believe the number of professional athletes that have a financial coach. Not a financial advisor, but a financial coach. And you hear these stories that, that's one of the things that always blew my mind earlier, but I understand a whole lot more, partially through my own situation. I mean, obviously I don't make what professional athletes make, but, again, as I've said before, I've never been in the, I've always had work. I've never been unemployed in my adult life. And I've never been in a position where I should be in some of the financial positions. But you hear about these professional athletes that go out and but if you really think about it, I mean, suppose, me and you play football together. Suppose, we were that world class. I mean, be honest with yourself and with me as you're sitting here. If you and I went onto a professional football, basketball career or something like that, we'd have done the same thing.
Oh, that's
in our
right.
20s.
Dude, I wasn't a professional athlete and I blew through whatever I had.
Exactly.
I mean, I couldn't make a paycheck last a week sometimes.
I used to look at that and be like, how could you do that? And now I sit back and I'm like, same way I did it.
Yeah.
Just on a smaller scale.
You're just playing with bigger numbers.
Right.
But you still, not only that, they have something that we don't deal with, is when you have that kind of money, they end up with friends out the yin yang.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people grew up poor.
Right.
And so all of a sudden they got this, and not only do they want to live a little, but they want to take care of their friends and family. And then people come out of the woodwork. Right. Same thing with people who win the lottery, right? First off, if I ever win the lottery, it's a miracle because I don't play it. Right? I'm like, if I win the lottery, you can guarantee Jesus had something to do with that because I don't ever play. But people, they hit the lottery and they think that it's going to solve the problems, and they end up bankrupt. Right. And so I've been broke, and I got myself there. And honestly, in my early years, I ended up in bankruptcy. Just be honest, sound honest about our lives, and it took a while to figure it out, and it had to come down to asking for help too, right. And being honest with who we were, right? Trying to keep up with the Joneses, and I was, honestly, because I came from not much, and I knew that she had a different life than I did. I was always trying to impress my wife. She wasn't asking me to, Brent. She didn't. Right. It wasn't like she was one, and I didn't tell her that's why I was trying to do it.
But as well as I know, it's been my experience, and I think that's part of being a male, is that I think a lot of times we don't ask, does this impress you, or we're trying to impress our wives.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I married up, so I had a lot of
impressing
to do.
Exactly. Exactly, right? From where we come from, and all of a sudden you marry a wife that's used to, they had a different life, and you're like trying to, I'm trying to impress her and wanting to make sure she has the best, and my identity's bound up in that.
Right.
My whole identity ended up bound up in money, trying to make it because I wanted to show.
And you hear things. One of the stories I've told often, and again, it's part of what I've learned through my spiritual growth as well too. Is that be careful what you hear. You know, I grew up in a middle class family. I mean, don't get me wrong. We were not poor by any stretch of the imagination. You know, always had what we needed, then always had what we wanted. But you know,
right.
And things like that. But I can remember just general conversations sitting around the table. Well, you know, if I ever came into money, you know, I'd do this and I'd do that, and and my mom, she's my spiritual rock. I mean, she was the one who, I'm where I'm at today because I got a praying mother. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
me
she
too.
was the spiritual
Amen.
rock in our family. But she would say that, and again, it in no way was her intent. But what I heard growing up is, money's the answer to all your problems. You know, you very rarely hear somebody, you know, and that's one thing I try to, when I'm talking about things like that, you know, if I had, or if I, you know, I try to say if God would allow this, or if God would provide this, because, you know, and again, this is something I've come through a lot of spiritual growth and things like that. And again, don't get me wrong, anybody knows my mom, if you're out there, don't tell her I'm because I don't blame her. It's what I heard, and it's the way I heard it, and it's the way the devil spun it in my head, basically.
Oh, sure.
That's what happened. If you want to get down to what really happened, you know, and then I really think it's why, you know, because you know, money was my God for a long time. I mean, and getting back to the whole addiction thing, I mean, you know, an addict is an addict all their lives. They're just either in the throes of it, and you know, I'm the same way. I consider myself the same way as far as with money. I mean, I'm a recovering money addict, and I still have, you know, there's still times you're out there, especially, you know, if the wife's not there, or
Yeah.
you know, like I said before, you know, we try to have that 24-hour rule if it's something we didn't already plan to do, but it's hard.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, and you know, and of course, you know, it's all, you know, the devil's always in here. You know, I work hard. I deserve this.
You deserve it. Oh yeah. Yeah. You know,
But also getting back to the point of don't have, you know, don't. There's a lot of resources in our local community and in most communities, and I mean, you know, I'm involved with community ministries. Our church provides food for the homeless, and but that's just a term. There are people that come to get meals there that they're not homeless, but their financial situation puts them, I mean, they can't afford their food. I mean,
yeah, they're strapped. Yeah.
they're strapped. I mean, you know, and you know, I've heard people make comment, well, I know that person's not homeless. Well, it doesn't mean they're not hungry. You know?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know the ministry here at your church, you know. I mean, some people can't, you know, they're in a situation they can't afford, to no fault of their own. It's not because they're overspending, it's just their lifestyle. And, you know, one of the other things I talk about a lot with people, you know, I can help you if you're broke. Depending on your situation, I can't help you if you're poor. You know, I mean, that's the thing people don't think about it. You know, I've been broke, you know, through fault of my own and things like
Right.
that. But you know, when you're talking about poor, that's a different situation. That's you know, maybe you don't have the skill set to make any more money, or you don't have the opportunity to make more money, and you know. So there's a difference between being broke and poor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you know, so if I were sick, right? If I was sick with my stomach or something, you know, and it got to where I couldn't eat or whatever, I mean, I would not be embarrassed to go to the doctor.
Exactly.
Right. Well, sometimes we're financially sick, you know. But also keep in mind that, you know, and you and I also talked about this, being financially sick can sometimes affect you mentally, right? Depression, anxiety, all those things can be born out of, especially when we think money's the answer, right? And we can't get the answer. And the reason we think that, though, right, because if my car's broke down and it cost X amount of dollars to fix it and I don't have X amount of dollars, then money looks like the answer.
Right.
And in that circumstance, yes, having enough money to get that car fixed, that's a symptom. But it's not the disease.
Right.
The disease is something much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens to be the symptom is I don't have the money to get my car fixed right now.
Right.
But the bigger disease, I got a spending disease.
Right.
Right. Sometimes it's just literally a mental disease to where I want to spend as if I make twice the amount that I do.
Right.
You know, and don't live within my means. Right. And I think some of that even comes back to the American mentality as well, where we think that for us to be successful, we got to live in such a way.
Well, I mean,
we finance it.
95% of the people, I mean, if you ask them, how do you define success? I mean, it's the size of my house, the price of my car. It's the price of everything, I mean, and again, I've been there, and still there. I mean, there are times I'm going down the road and I look at them, man, I love to have that car, or, but fortunately, I've matured enough in my life where I say I don't need it. I mean, and like I said, I'm not a car guy. I'm not someone who has to have a specific type of vehicle. But to me, if it gets you to A to B and back safely, I mean, now it's a whole different story. If you got it, I mean, it's just done. The car just ran its course. I mean, it's a safety issue. Then obviously, you need to
do something.
Yeah. But again, you don't have to replace it with a BMW.
Well, I will tell you. So I've replaced my vehicle with a Volvo. It's got 178,000 miles on it. New to me.
Right.
But it was somebody else's. But it was in good shape. We did all the research and we ended up with a vehicle that works for us. But it's got a lot of miles, and I'm fine with that. Now, what I'm willing to let my wife drive and what I'm willing to drive, two different things, right? Me breaking down is different than my wife breaking down, right? And so we look at those kind of things differently. But I went from a 3,400 square foot house to a 280 foot camper. Let me tell you what I learned about that. I learned a couple things. It's good lessons. Number one is we were able to get my same reclining love seat in that camper. You know what that meant? At the end of the day, I sat in the same chair, and that chair took up the same amount of square feet in that camper as it did that house. I was sitting in the same chair, reclining the same way.
Right.
$0. Right. Number two is I found out that when you live in something smaller, you can go with a smaller TV, and it still seems as big because I was right there.
Right.
If I recline my feet out, it had just enough room for Sal to get by between the TV and my foot. But I found that a 29-inch TV at this distance looked as big as a 60-inch way out there, and I'm like, Sal, we saved money twice. We only got to heat this little space. And we got a TV a quarter of the size, and it still seems as big. I'm still watching the same NASCAR race, by the way.
Right.
Still watching the same stuff. And you know what we found? Sal and I occupied the same amount of space, whether we was in the camper or we was in that big house.
Well,
we took up the same amount of space, her and I, and we was just as happier.
And I remember years ago, of course, I mean, everybody, but the first house is, that's the step house. Because you can afford to get into it, you buy that, and then you're going to move on. Well, I'm still in my first house for many reasons, some financial, some other things, but back years ago, the local basketball league was having some issues and stuff like that, and I mean, I grew up in that league. I played in it, refed in it, and stuff like that. And some people came to me and said, "Hey, we really think you could help with some of the issues we're having. We'd really like you to." So anyway, long story short, I became the president of the league. I ran it for 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, every weekend, and my wife can attest to this, from 8 o'clock on Saturday morning until 7 or 8 on, I was there all the time. But during that time, we realized that, would it be nice to have a bigger home, or one that fit, had an office, like we would like to have, which we don't have in our current home, and didn't have, but, and even now that, our daughter's grown and, she's about to launch and stuff like that, but most people, I mean, other than on special occasions, you might have a family picnic or have some friends over and stuff. I mean, most people don't spend much time in their home. I mean, it really is not worth what,
Well, I could tell you what we found out was we had a lot of junk. Right? When you go from a big house to a camper, you find out that we actually had a step in between. We was in the apartment upstairs in the church for a little while. But we needed that space for another family, so we lived on our camper, and we found that we downsized stuff, and we didn't clutter no more, right? There's stuff you keep. Do we really need that?
Right.
If no, we throw it away, right? So we just found ourselves getting rid of stuff that we don't normally use anymore, and so it actually helped us. So now I actually live in the old home place now. So after my dad passed, We ended up back in the old home place, and so I'm back in that little old 1,100 square foot rancher that I grew up in. Right. When I got away from there, I'm getting a big old house up on a mountain, right? And so I'm getting away from this thing. I built a big old house, you know, and so now I'm back in that place, and it seems huge to me too, by the way, since, you know, after living in the camper, and I'm like, you know, it just we just look at things differently now, and you know, the amount of space we really need versus, you know, what the average American thinks they should have is just two different things. And you know, and honestly, the thing we also is like, you know, you can personally only occupy so much space,
right?
And you just got to clean it too. We found that, you know, we had to clean all that space, and we're just like, we really don't need that much space, and so it just made us look at things totally different. But you know, the thing is, it's easy for me to say that now because I'm at this stage of my life, right? And you and I both talked about that. It's easy for us to sit here and say, because we're now, you know, we're now 50 years into this thing.
Yeah, we're where our parents used to be.
Yeah, where our parents used to be, and we used to think they were crazy. Right?
Exactly.
You don't understand. That's what we used to say.
One of the things, and you can ask my wife about this, I say a lot, especially once, you know, I used to give my siblings a lot of advice on parenting before I had a child. And then I had one, and now I apologize for them for all the bad advice. But the other piece of it is that, you know, and I'm losing my train of thought, so let me catch up to, you know, my mouth catch up to my brain. But you just, you know, I wish, the comment I make probably too frequently these days is, you know, I wish I still knew as much as I did when I was, you know, 18 to 30 years old. Because then we know it all back then.
We knew it all. Yeah.
You know, I'm like, man, I used to know it all. What happened to me? You know, because I don't know nothing.
Now I know I don't know anything.
Exactly.
I have nothing figured out. You know, so to kind of bring this to a close, though, we come back to this thing is, you know, money can be great when you have it in proper perspective and you allow it to work for you instead of you working for it. Right? And so there are ways to do that, and a lot of people don't understand how to go about that. And so that's where folks like you, financial coaches, I mean, I do HVAC for a living, right? So, and I charge people to work on their systems too, but I kind of do it like you. I got a sliding scale based on what their needs are, and you know, I know what they kind of have to work with. And so I look at it as both a job and also a ministry at the same time. But if you're not sure what to do, you know, and you know that you're not sure what to do, but you know what you're doing ain't working, then seek out help.
Yeah,
I mean, it really boils down to that.
And again, I mean, I'm sure you do this in your line of work. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to talk to me the first time, because I got to figure out if I can help you, and I'm not going to charge you money if I can't help you, and I'm only going to charge you, you know, again, what is reasonable. But you know, and some people look at me and say, well, you know, what, you know, it's not fair that you charge in it. Well, life's not fair sometimes, but it's my heart that says that this person can afford this much, and I can help them get there. And a lot of times it's on the back end. It's, you know, let me help you get to this point where you can afford it. And you know, and then we'll work out how you get. But you know, everybody needs help. I mean, somewhere in your life, I know, you know, there's only one perfect one, and we ain't it.
Yeah.
At least I haven't met any.
Well, the Bible says a servant's worthy of his hire.
Right.
Right. And so when you're providing service, you know, well, first off, I found this too. There's only value if they got skin in the game.
Well, and that was another point I meant. You know, one of the things I have found is, you know, I have tried to work with people, you know, and said, you know, you just, you know, you're in a situation right now. You need to worry about your situation, not me adding a financial burden on top of everything. But like you said, those people tend to be the people that, you know, because they're not, you know, having any type of, as you, the term you use, skin in the game. They're, you know, a lot of people say, well, I'm not out anything, so if I do it or I don't, you know, I'm not, you know, and that makes a difference. But I know you talked about your dad. I know my granddad, you know, or you talked about Sal's dad, I think, you know. My granddad was always a, you know, you get what you pay for type of guy. And by the way, he never, I never remember him ever taking a loan out for anything but a home. And the last home he lived in, he didn't take out a loan on that.
Wow.
And I know people think, you know, when I'm talking about, but I mean, it really depends on how bad you want something. at the end of the day, because again, I've not worked with anybody personally, but I've heard plenty of stories of people, they live in the old crappy trailer or whatever, but they're saving towards that, and there are people that, and again, it's very rare, but there are people that have paid cash for their house.
Yeah.
And that don't get me wrong, it takes a dedication to do that. I mean, you got to be dedicated to, especially, again, I'm getting off subject here, but if you'd have told me back when we graduated high school that there'd be $500,000 homes in Jefferson County, I'd have said, give me some of what you're smoking.
Oh yeah, yeah. I want some of that. I want some of that oceanfront property you got there in Harper's Ferry, right?
Right, but it's and that's one of the things I often share with people I work with. I tell my wife this all the time. I mean, if you'd have told me at 18 that me and my spouse would be making what we make, and even as far as college savings for my daughter, if you'd have told me that when I started saving, when she was born, I started her a 529 plan, and I've faithfully given into that and stuff like that. And if you'd have told me that I have what I have today, as she's about going to college, I'd have said college is paid for. Well, some of the school she's going to, it ain't going to cover a year. Or she's thinking about going to, with the decisions that be made, and there are other parts in there. I mean, to her credit, she's earned a lot of scholarships and things like that. So again, we'll be fine. And, I'm not concerned about it, but I never would have.
Yeah, when I saw what the first year was going to cost me with Jordan, I'm like,
and that's instant.
I didn't plan it very well. I'm like, y'all really charge that? There should be a law against that.
Exactly.
Good grief! And to know they went up there and the first semester, I didn't want to talk about that. That's a throwaway. That's all I got to say. But he went on a 5-year plan. But hey, he finished, and I'm thankful for that.
It took me 4.5. I mean, I'll be honest with you.
It took me 3 years to get 2-year degrees. I did it. I finally got through it. But but this really comes down to discipline. Understanding money, understanding the value, and knowing what money can and can't do, right? It can't buy your happiness.
Right.
It can't give you real peace of mind. It can't provide, you thinking that, even people that have money in the bank, they have more money than they have month. But, I've met people like that, and they didn't have any more peace of mind than me, right? Because that money just doesn't provide that in a way that you think it can. But money, is part of life. And so,
yeah, I mean, you got to deal with it.
You got to deal with it.
There's no way around it. It's
But get help, seek it out, and get with someone that's really going to tell you the truth, and operate with integrity. Because there are people out there that they say they want to help you with your money, but they just want your money, right? And there's a big difference with that. And so seek out something that somebody you trust. Like there may be somebody watching this video that's nowhere near where we're at, and maybe maybe using your service is not, although you could do it. I mean, distance surely shouldn't.
Yeah,
be
I mean,
right?
I can really work with anybody. I mean, I would never work with someone from another country because I wouldn't understand a lot of what happens
their
there,
dynamics and their
But
economy.
I mean, I can work with anyone, and most financial coaches are. I mean, and a lot of it is. It's especially since COVID. I mean, everybody does everything
online,
and I'm the same way. I'm willing to meet with you in person or things like that. But yeah, whether you like it or not, it's something that's going to affect your life. But it's really it can be positive, it can be negative. It really depends on it's like your relationship with Christ. I mean, and it's one of the things again as I get older and contemplate things. I mean, I've become one of those people that nothing that's been created, in my opinion, is good or bad. It's how we use it. It's how we relate to it.
Yeah.
It's how, I mean, I think we were talking before about how people use social media and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of positive out there if you want to go out and look at it. I mean, you can find that, and you can find a lot of negative. But so it's. But if I had any advice for anybody, regardless of age or whatever, if you feel like you need the help, seek it out. If you can, get an accountability partner, and I'm going to give a little further advice. Don't get your best friend to be your accountability partner unless you know, I mean, you know, it's kind of like doctors. Doctors don't operate on, because on people they know, because there's that relationship, and it clouds your judgment, and because in general, I don't, if it was someone I knew well and they came to me, I would literally tell them to go to someone else, because again, known Huff, I mean, we don't hang out like we did when we were younger, but I also don't know that I could be disciplined enough where he came to me with an issue and said, when he really wanted, and I'm like, again, it's that guilt thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
it makes it tough.
you might guilt me into giving you bad advice.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes
so,
you're too close to the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have someone who's going to help, but it help, and that's from a spiritual discipline as well as financial and stuff like that. Make sure it's someone that's going to have your best interests at heart and not be influenced by your relationship.
Yeah, manipulate.
So things like that.
That's awesome. So, like, if they wanted to get a hold of you, there's could we do an email address in maybe the description or something, or how would they know if someone wanted your services?
Actually, I'll give you a card, because I basically run everything. But my wife is a clinical psychologist, and so I do it as a service out of her business instead of having my own thing. But yeah, I'll get you some information.
We'll just put it in the description of somebody.
Yeah.
Or actually, and I have no problem just putting mine in. If you say, hey, you know what, I need a financial coach, and I could put you in contact with.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, even if you don't need it, if you know someone that does, by all means. And you don't have to suggest me. Suggest any. Have you thought about a financial coach? Again, I'm not here to promote me.
Yeah.
I'm here to.
Well, we want to promote the fact that
provide value to.
It's not a bad thing to ask for help.
Right. Yeah. That's the main thing.
And that finances break up marriages. They cause people to go into depression, and they ruin lives.
Again, obviously, as I said before, I've been in finance pretty much all my adult life, and so, I have to do a lot of research on it. I get a lot of articles, and one of the things, again, it's one of those things that you think about, and you probably know this in your heart, but I was reading an article, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 months ago, that come through one of the feeds that I get on the internet. So if you're concerned about, being embarrassed or whatever like that, it's a statistical fact that I think it was Money Magazine did this survey, and don't quote me exactly, but I believe the 62% of Americans whose salary, they make over $100,000 a year. That's pretty good income. There's plenty of people that make. If you're making 6 figures, you ought to be in pretty good shape. 62% of the Americans who make over that are living paycheck to paycheck or worse.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Because I know a lot of people make less than that, and they're trying to ascribe. If I could just get to that, everything would be better. But yet, over half of the people that make that,
there's no salary that and I'm probably belaboring a point, but if you're the type of person that and I struggled with this, still struggle with it, throughout my life. Well, when I get here, I'm going to be okay. And when you get there, it's the next thing you want, and it's the next thing you want. There is no here. Here is heaven. Yeah. When you got there,
then you're all right.
You've got it.
You've got somewhere.
Yeah, you've succeeded.
You've arrived. Absolutely.
But short of that, there's nothing here that's going to. At least I don't know anybody that doesn't have something that they would like to have or want to have more than what they have.
We all do. All the time. But you finally get to that place. And again, it's easy for us because we're older. I'm thinking about some younger people. Maybe we are. I'm thinking about some younger people that are listening. Well, you've had stuff. Yeah, we've had it and lost it too. But it's a little more wise. If people want to be wise, learn from someone else's mistakes. You don't have to repeat them. Right. But some people are just bound and determined that they're going to have to learn on their own. And but our prayer is that that if you're in, if you're having financial difficulty, that you'll seek out the help, and that's really what we wanted to get across, is that you're not alone, and that you're just because you make less than what some other people are doesn't mean that that's the only reason you're in that situation. People that make far more greater than you are in the same boat.
Yeah, there's a lot of people I know make less money than me that are a whole lot happier than I have been, over time.
Me too.
And one last thing I would like to say is, when you're seeking out help, I'm not saying this is an absolute. There are people out there that haven't been in any situations that can help you, but think about because I can honestly say I'm still on this. I have not reached my goals that I set out to do. I'm still on that path, and I've been there, so I've got that experience. And that doesn't make me a better coach than someone who hasn't had that experience. But consider that when you're doing it. Really think about the person that you're working with, that that they can help you, and vet them. Call people that they worked with.
Yeah.
Ask for references and things like that, because again, some people can present a very grateful heart, and they're really just looking to get you in worse shape to benefit them.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Make sure you're working with people like that.
Yep. Good deal, man. I appreciate you hanging out with me. And first, it was good to
good.
see you. I ain't seen you in a long time. I think the last time we saw each other was like IHOP. Did we meet up for IHOP, like for dessert one night or something?
Right, that's probably a couple
years.
Still playing softball.
Yeah, it's been a long while. But would you pray us out and pray for the folks that will actually watch this video and pray that God for them and that God bless them?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity to share my ministry and share a little bit of knowledge that I have and my experience. I pray for Pastor Huff and his ministry, that those that are in his flock and those that follow him, that they would be blessed. And I just ask that people take what we've talked about today and take it to heart and just ultimately do your will, Lord. I pray that you would come into their hearts, and if there's anybody out there listening to this that hasn't accepted you, that's the very first thing anybody should do, whether it's for their financial, mental, spiritual health. But I just ask that you would watch over us all, help us in all areas of our lives, and continue to bless each and every one until we all meet and are with you. I ask it all in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.